Welcome to Live with Ajane. I'm Ajane, and I'm back with another tutoring video for LSAT prep. And I looked at the comments, and the requests were not a few different requests, but one of the requests that stuck out to me was one about going into science passages. So I went and just skimmed the um, reading comp drill sets in LawHub, and I found what seemed to be a pretty sciencey passage in drill set 4. So today I'm going to be going over drill set 4 in reading comp. And yeah, hopefully this is really helpful for those of you. What you're gonna see is the same strategy. It's gonna put you there, but hopefully just see me practice in that way. It's gonna be helpful for you all. And yeah, I'm gonna get right in there. Now, before I jump in and start doing that, I just want to remind you all that if you like the tutoring style that I have, this speaks to you, go ahead and go to my Ko-fi. I'm gonna have a link down below and sign up for tutoring so that you can get more access. Right now, there's 3 tiers of membership, but pretty soon I'm just going to transition to just the one type of membership, which will be a monthly subscription where you pay a rate, and with that rate, that you'll get 1 hour of one-on-one tutoring and a free 1 hour group study session. So for that flat price, you'll get 1 free hour of personal tutoring, 1 free hour of group tutoring, and then you get 50% off of the general pricing when it comes to booking other sessions for private tutoring. So right now, those rates are at $55 for the monthly membership. And then if you book any additional one-on-one tutoring sessions, it's $50 a piece. After I hit 10 people, the price is going up. My point is to keep things still accessible, but I'm just raising the rate a little bit to balance out the fact that I'll be putting more time and energy into keeping up with more names and all that and the cost of things and all of that. So anyway, right now I believe we're at 8 people. So if you want the $50 rate, now's the time to go ahead because when I hit 10, it's going up a little bit. Um, But yes, these videos here will always be free. And actually, there's a video right now that is exclusive to my members, and it's been exclusive for the month of September, but will be hitting the YouTube streets on October 1st. And it will be a tutorial or an introduction video to conditional reasoning, which is one of the core functionings of the LSAT, in particular in the logical reasoning section. So yeah, I'll still have free stuff here to help people out. But the paid services, go to Ko-fi. Link will be in the description below. Okay, that should be all I have to say about the upkeep. If you have any more questions about that, leave a comment, whatever. If you love the video, please leave a comment. But we're gonna jump right in. So let's get into reading comp. Share here. Okay, make sure all my stuff is good. I should have full screen this, but whatever. So do this. All right. Resume. Okay, I'm gonna cut that off. Go here. Okay, so second passage was the sciencey one. First passage is something else. I don't know. I just didn't see science terms, so I kept it moving. So we're gonna go ahead and start here, and I'm gonna finish the whole section. Oh, and another quick note. Again, this is on LawHub. All these drill sets should be free. Like even if I think you have to like create an account with LawHub to access them, but like the drill sets are free. So go to LawHub and use this. Practice these things on your own. And remember that the format that you see here on LawHub is the exact format that you'll have on test day. So whatever um, studying tool that you're using, getting used to, say you're using Seven Sage or say you're using LSAT Demon or something like that. If that speaks to you, go ahead and use that. But just make sure that you check in and you're familiar with what things are going to look like on test day because if you get to test day and you're like, oh my gosh, this looks different, and you're freaking out, you're already compromising your points. So at minimum, just go here, check things out. The drill sets are cool to get like small chunks of access, but they have full practice tests. They have full practice tests also for free, available to the public, regardless of whether or not you have a paid subscription. So check out those free resources. I'm all about the resources, y'all. Okay, I'm jumping right in. So this passage is adapted from a book published in 1979. Okay. Videotape can be an expedient means of presenting witness testimony in court trials. An opponent of this practice, legal scholar S.J. Brackle, believes that videotape yields less reliable testimony or lessens jurors' ability to assess witnesses' credibility. Okay. So pausing there, we have a couple sentences that say videotape can be a fast, expedient means fast, means of presenting witness testimony, but this guy Brackle doesn't like it. And he doesn't like it because he says there's less reliable testimony or lessens ability to assess credibility. Okay. So we have a guy that doesn't like this for two different reasons. Let's see where we go with that. Usually that means we're probably going to dig deeper into that. We'll see. Um, Witnesses, Brackle thinks, yeah, we're going deeper, are better aware of the stringent truthfulness requirement and the penalties for perjury when they're actually present in the courtroom. Brackle sounds like a micromanager. That's what, right? What he just said is, oh, people know better the consequences when they're there in person. It's like, you have those people that insist that you have to come in person to do certain tasks, which really could probably be done over virtual or maybe even in an email or on the phone, right? You don't have to be there, but they're like, you have to because they won't be as reliable, right? It's giving that to me. But anyway, let me get back to the past and not jump too much into my own world. But he sounds like a micromanager. Okay, so better aware of the stringent truthfulness requirement and penalties for perjury when they're present in the courtroom. Also, Brackle claims videotape cannot capture in vivid detail the whole range of cues associated with testifying. Okay, paralinguistic cues such as tone of voice, cadence, and pitch, and nonverbal cues that include gestures as well as involuntary signs of nervousness. Okay, so he just said that, and it's extending on these 2 points we said earlier. One of the problems Burt Brackle has with the witness testimony over videotape is that it compromises, according to him, people's awareness of their penalties for lying. Perjury is just lying in the courtroom. And then he also says that it can't capture all the verbal, because paralinguistic, all the examples they give are verbal. Voice, cadence, pitch, those are verbal. So all the verbal cues and the non-verbal cues, those are compromised. We can't like observe those as closely as jurors. Okay. The fact that phenomena such as failure to maintain eye contact with a questioner, fidgeting, and inappropriate tone of voice are considered in many cultures to signal deceit provides some anecdotal support for Brackle's claims. Okay. So the author presents us with this guy Brackle who's against videotaping witness testimony for the reasons we said before, which are better awareness of penalty when you're in person and jurors can better look at the verbal and nonverbal cues. Okay, cool. And then the author says, yeah, well, there's some evidence to support what Brackle has to say, um, because failure to make eye contact, these other things that are aligned with what Brackle had to say, um, give some support for how he observed people and hinting at deceit. Okay. Brackle's critics, okay, so we're seeing the other side now, argue that witnesses giving their testimony outside the courtroom, in a lawyer's office or recording studio, are adequately aware, if given a formal reminder, of the penalties for perjury. The critics also suggest that even truthful witnesses might, under the stress of testifying in court, forget or involuntarily repress information. All right, so the critics are like, yeah, you're doing too much because for the part where they forget about the perjury consequences, you can still obtain that awareness by just giving a reminder. And then the part about, well, there's other consideration because it doesn't really directly undermine anything he said, at least not yet, clearly yet to me. But another thing that Brackle isn't considering, according to these critics, right, would be that if you're in a courtroom, people might be compromising their testimony in this way, which is forgetting or repressing information because there's so much stress in that space. So what's up with that, Brackle? Okay, so now we got a debate going on. Let's see what the author does with that. Brackle's arguments against videotape testimony presume that witnesses' nonverbal and paralinguistic cues are reliable basis for assessing veracity. All right. So his arguments presume, just take to be the case, that the verbal and the nonverbal are reliable for assessing veracity is truth. That vera, think of verified and words like that, that root vera comes from Latin and means truth. So basically, Brackle thinks that verbal and nonverbal cues are reliable for assessing truth. Sounds like we're going to undermine that. But in court, when a great deal of both verbal and nonverbal information is available. Wow, funny. Now they want to use verbal and nonverbal. They got tired of using paralinguistic. It was always unnecessary. But okay, let me go back. But in court, when a great deal of both verbal and nonverbal information is available, it may be difficult for jurors to assimilate it all. Hmm. This can trigger stereotyping strategies. Judgments based on preconceptions rather than critical observation. To simplify the task of assimilating information. All right, so let me pause right there because it's really important. So basically, what the author's saying now is that like Brackle's claiming that um when you're in person and you can see the verbal and nonverbal cues, it helps you to assess the truth. But the author's saying in court, when you have so much information, it can be difficult for the jurors to basically put all that information together. And so instead of being critical and careful and observing those things closely, people usually, their brains get tired, they start stereotyping to make it easier to process all the information that's on the table. All right, that's a big issue for Brackle. Moreover, factors other than deceit. For example, a witness's anxiety about addressing a suspicious audience can mimic classic signs of deceit, thereby misleading jurors. So, boom, authors essentially undermining what Brackle had to say too, because now the author's saying like, all right, well, we can't actually rely on this thing about being able to observe the truth about a testimony in person from the verbal and nonverbal cues. One, people stereotype when they're observing. Two, people can show signs of anxiety, which look like signs of deceit, but it's anxiety. Okay. Relative to live testimony, videotape presents jurors with less information about witnesses' nonverbal cues. Okay. Moreover, videotaped witnesses, feeling less intimidated while testifying, are less likely to present false signals of deception. I'm actually surprised about how the second sentence went because in the first sentence I thought that they were going to go against the other side as well. Um, right? Because it says videotape presents jurors with less information about witnesses and nonverbal cues. So I was like, okay, are we playing the Brackle's hand again? But now that I'm thinking about it and I combine it with the second sentence, I think about the fact we just came from a paragraph talking about when there's too much information that people start to stereotype instead of being careful. So this actually plays into the hand of what the author was presenting as counter evidence to what Brackle's argument was, which is again, less evidence, I mean, less information with the videotapes is good. Um, and when people feel less intimidated under videotape conditions, less likely to get the anxiety cues, which look like deception. Okay. So it sounds like the author's with this other side and against Brackle. It is reasonable to conclude, I could have told you that probably from the first sentence, but we'll talk about that later. It is reasonable to conclude then that if the amount of nonverbal information jurors receive is essentially unrelated, okay, or even inversely related, okay, to the accuracy of their judgments. Okay, because I was like, what are we comparing it to? Let me slow that down then. So it's reasonable to conclude that if the amount of nonverbal information, okay, so the body cues and stuff, and maybe some of the paralinguistic stuff. All right. So if that stuff is unrelated or inverse related to the accuracy of judgments. So if it was directly related, they would both go up together. So with more of that information, you would get more accuracy. Inverse means with more nonverbal information, less accuracy. With less nonverbal information, more accuracy, which is what we were talking about just before. When there's too much information, people start making stereotypes instead of actual critical, careful judgments. Okay, so if we take it to be the case that that's true about the inverse relationship, or just no relationship at all about accuracy of judgments, then videotape testimony could be employed without reducing jurors' ability to detect deception. Okay. These criticisms of Brackle's views have some empirical support. All right, now you just hammering the nail in the coffin. In one study, interviewees were asked to mingle lies and truth in their responses. Okay. Subjects who watched and listened to the live interviews, rather than any recorded version, had only a 58% accuracy rate in detecting deception. Whereas subjects who merely read transcripts or heard audio tape recordings, that's weird. Why didn't you just compare this to something where they're watching a video? Well, that's a weakness in this comparison, but whatever. Okay, so they heard read transcripts or heard audio tape recordings, had a 77% accuracy rate. Okay. It'd be better if they were like watching it on a videotape, like we're talking about. Because, I mean, what if there's something about the eyes playing a factor? Whatever. I don't know. But okay, cool. Um, the researchers concluded that some visual cues may distract from other cues that more reliably indicate mendacity. The researchers concluded that some visual cues may distract from other cues that more reliably indicate mendacity. Mendacity has to do with truth. I just can't remember on which side of the truth it is. But I think it is truth itself, if I can recall that right. But just like looking at things in context, right? Like they're really trying to throw you off here at the end and be like, oh, here's a big word. Um, but yes, okay, so the researchers said that video cu visual cues may distract. So I guess that's why we have like this thing about the videotape not being relevant. So the author's closing out with this idea that the visual can be a further distraction and compromising jurors' ability to be able to tell truth or not from a witness. Okay, so how does all this come together? Well, generally, we have the author presenting this guy Brackle, and then we're just tearing Brackle down the whole rest of the argument. So the first paragraph, we get introduction of Brackle's view, and then the second paragraph, we get a note about critics to Brackle, and then the third paragraph, now the author's jumping in on that business. Um, and then the fourth paragraph, we further support what the author had to present as an opposing point to Brackle, right? Because the third paragraph, the author's like, oh, yeah, in addition to the critiques from the critics about, oh, the testimony in a videotape, you can remind people about the perjury consequences and it's less intense on videotape. So we get more information more likely or like less likely to forget or repress information. And then the author's like, oh, in addition to that, um, we can't take the cues that happen in person to be reliable because if there's too much information, or if there's anxiety at play, that can compromise how the jurors receive the information or process it, or how accurately they determine truth to be on the table or not. Okay, so then after we get those first three paragraphs, and it's just looking back at Brackle, the fourth and fifth paragraph just literally tear them the rest of the way out. So the fourth paragraph, um, what was that one again? Reason to include nonverbal information. Oh, it's a supporting point. So they say that like videotape provides less information. So this helps solve the issue that was presented with Brackle. So like first paragraph, we get Brackle's argument. Second paragraph, we get critics and their responses to the issues that Brackles raises. The third paragraph, we move away from the responses that the critics will have to Brackle and we start presenting more information that Brackle has to deal with now. And the fourth paragraph, we are not doing the thing where we're giving more information, but we're supporting what we already brought up, right? So, like, these are issues that Brackle has to deal with. And then, furthermore, right? Um, when you look at this other side and looking at the videotapes, they don't have those same issues. This further shows why videotapes are better because we don't have an overwhelming amount of information, and there might be an inverse or unrelated relationship between judgments and nonverbal information. And then the last paragraph just further supports this point and talked about an empirical study where the visual cues seem to indicate a distraction from being able to observe something about the truth or falsehood of things. All right. So that's the reason I go over each of those paragraphs and I'm trying to understand how they connect and how the argument flows is because I know when I go over here to the questions in reading comp, they're going to be asking me questions about how all these things come together. They're going to be asking me about what happens where, to what extent is this true? Did this actually happen, right? So it's going to help me to be able to remember where things happen in each paragraph. It's going to help me to remember how things are presented, how things are supported or denied, and the overall view. And before I go over there, I always go ahead and assume main point is my first question, which it's the question. I went ahead and peeked. But before I get there, I always just tell myself the main point. Because 9 times out of 10 they're gonna ask that. But even if they don't ask it, it's just still too good to have in mind because if you can't say the main idea of the article in your own words, I was telling my subscription holders this earlier when we had our group session. If you don't know the main idea, you should be very wary. You should be very scared about moving on to any other questions. You need to be able to tell yourself the main point in your own words. So, in my own words, the main point of this argument is that although Brackle claims that in-person testimony is more reliable or more inclined to observing truth in witness testimony, evidence says, likewise, otherwise, evidence says that actually videotape testimony might be better, right? So, despite Brackle's claims about in person being better, there's a lot of evidence to support the idea that videotaping is the better method of jurors observing witness testimony for truth, something like that. Okay, so which one of the following most accurately expresses the main point of the passage? Again, Brackle says in person better. Evidence says videotape might be better in terms of finding truth with jurors and observation. I'm on that. Okay. A, empirical research supports the claim that removing the distractions of live testimony enhances the ability of jurors to detect mendacity. I don't like that because it's missing the fact that, like, I mean, this is at the end, right? And cool, that's the conclusion we come to in a sense from the author. But, like, considering the whole argument, we have to deal with Brackle and what Brackle had to say. And it's missing that, right? We're missing the fact that we spent a lot of time undermining what Brackle had to say. And it just leaves us with this other thing. And so I don't like this one. I'll keep it open in case I feel like I'm wrong later, but I'm ready to knock this out. All right. B, a number of formidable objections have been raised to legal scholar S.J. Brackle's theories about the shortcomings of videotape testimony. All right, so this option actually does deal with Brackle. And it does bring up the fact that, um, right, there's like all these issues with what Brackle had to say and his perspective. But I feel like, yeah, I just feel like this one isn't quite capturing all of it either, but this is definitely better than the first one. Just no, it's too limited in scope. Okay, see, legal scholar S.J. Brackle's contention that witnesses who testify in court are less likely to perjure themselves has been thrown out in has been thrown into doubt by recent research. That's not the main point of the passage. Um, the passage wasn't like, oh, well, because of all this stuff that we've seen, um, this guy's argument is now put into total question. Like that wasn't the main thing of what we were doing. We were focusing on breaking down what Brackle had to say and saying like evidence is leaning the other way, but that's not like we weren't dealing with this whole thing about how it stands in the space of research. Like has been thrown into doubt by recent research. Yeah, nope. Legal scholar S.J. Brackle's hypothesis about the response of jurors to videotape testimony has been rejected by researchers who have studied the use of this technology. We didn't say that. That's not even what we said. We put everything in a question, but we did not like say that people would just go ahead and reject it. We're just stating a bunch of problems with his viewpoint. Sorry. E. Critics of legal scholar S.J. Brackle have assembled evidence supporting the view that videotape testimony is indistinguishable from live courtroom. Huh? Huh? Indistinguishable. If anything, they said that the live courtroom is not as good as videotaped. Not indistinguishable. So nope. I'm gonna go with B. I feel pretty solid about that. Let's see. And now make me look like no fool tonight. Yeah, I already knew it. It felt really good. All right. Now, this is a reminder though. I had a 173, not a 180, which means there's room for error. And for those things, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna grow from them and we're gonna figure out why the right answer was right and why the wrong answer was wrong, period. Because that's the work. And I'm here to exemplify that for you all. Here's a pro tip that I usually really emphasize to my subscription-based people. So you want to work on this more and work on this skill, hit me up in Kofi, not down. Hit me up in Kofi. Review is where most of the progress happens. It's not in doing the questions, it's in your review. When you struggle with questions, flag them. And then when you look at what you got right and wrong at the end, go back to your flag questions, whether you got them right or wrong, and go back to the ones that you got wrong and figure out why the right answer was right and why the wrong answer was wrong. That's my pro tip. And I'll leave more elaboration on that for people who come and pay for the one-on-one services. Um, oh, also, brief note, we're at 500 subscribers, so I have a fun giveaway that I'll talk about at the end of this video. Stay tuned. All right, moving on. Question two. The passage provides information most relevant to answering which one of the following questions. Okay, so this question wants me to, most relevant to answer which of the following questions, figure out what the passage has to say about these questions. So for four out of these five options, the passage not going to answer the question. And for one of these options, the passage is going to answer the question. So I'm looking for which one of these questions is actually answered by the passage. Okay. Can't answer that before I get there. Got to look at the question, so we're just going to jump right in. A, which particular paralinguistic cues are regarded as indicating involuntary repression of information by witnesses? No, baby. I'm trying to trick you. So we did talk about involuntary repression of information, but that was from having stress. Remember in the second paragraph? That was from having stress of testifying and just having that happen to them, like they might involuntary repress information. We didn't talk about paralinguistic cues in relation to that. And when we did talk about paralinguistic cues conveying anything, it would be signs of deceit. And these are the phenomena, fidgeting and purple tone, blah, 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 right? Like those would be signs of deceit, not involuntary repression of information. What's the difference between those? If somebody's like, what? Repression of information is like when you repress memories. Have you ever heard that term? And that's when you're like literally like, I can't recall. Trauma is not letting me be able to remember things. And involuntary just means you didn't choose that. Versus deceit, which is like I'm lying. Two very different things. Moving forward. B, what sometimes prompts jurors to resort to stereotyping strategies? Hold on. I think that might be the one. Because we talked about them going into, and you always want to double check, but we talked about people resorting to stereotyping when they were overwhelmed by information. Oh, wait, I just answered that. And let me just double check it. That was in this one. Stereotype strategy, yeah. Hmm. It may be difficult for jurors to assimilate it all. This can trigger stereotyping strategies. What prompts them was makes them do this? Yeah, yeah, that's it. Okay. So I'm assuming the rest of these are gonna be wrong because that's answered. All right. Hopefully that's clear. Let me step back just in case somebody was like, what just happened here? I feel like I did a lot of that in my head. So the question is, what sometimes prompts jurors to resort to stereotyping strategies? We can find a direct answer in there, because we're asking what makes yours stereotype sometimes. And the answer is when they have too much information. Because here in this third paragraph, one, two, three, yeah. Remember they said that in court, when a great deal of both verbal and nonverbal information is available, it may be difficult for jurors to assimilate it all. This can trigger stereotyping strategies, right? So the answer is the amount of information. Okay. If it's still unclear, leave a comment below. It's hard to understand what's clear or not because I can't see facial reactions because I'm talking to myself. So if we're anything we go through, if you have a question, leave a comment down below and I'll answer it if I have time. C, is presentation of videotape testimony a widespread practice at present? Is presentation of videotape testimony a widespread practice? We don't know. That wasn't answered. We don't know. We don't know. They didn't talk about the extent to which these are practiced. They just talked about the differences in what we can do with truth. D, why is the use of videotape testimony regarded as an expedient way of presenting testimony? Hmm, we didn't talk about the speed. Expedient means speedy. We didn't talk about how videotape testimony is a speedier way of presenting. The whole point of talking about videotape testimony was it help to determine truth better. Nope. Is there empirical evidence supporting the view? Empirical, remember we came down here with that, but let's see what they're asking. Is there empirical evidence supporting the view that witnesses sometimes forget relevant information under stress? We don't know. It's not answered here. The empirical support we talked about was for support to talk about how visual cues might, like, I was gonna make up a word, confuddle, might murky the waters in being able to determine what was the truth or not. Um, so yeah, no. Show answer. Boom. Next. I hope you're also seeing that like we're able to go through these pretty quickly because they have a very strong understanding of what's happening in the text and where things are. So when you're going through reading comp, spend most of your time over here, and then this is gonna come really easy. Three, the author mentions the large amount of verbal and nonverbal information available in court. Okay. Love these because they highlight it, and if you don't remember, you can track it, but you should be able to do that on your own anyway. Anyway, the author mentions the large amount of verbal and nonverbal information available in court. Okay. Second sentence of the third paragraph, primarily to, oh, why did he do it? Why did she do it? Why did they do it? The author mentions the large amount of information available in court. I don't even got to see the rest of that because I remember it was to talk about how that can be overwhelming for the jurors and it can compromise their ability to be able to um, observe people with a critical and careful eye rather than falling on the stereotypes. And I'm going to double check over here to make sure that's what was talked about in this paragraph and I'm not tripping. But let's see. Inquiry, blah, blah, blah. It may be difficult for jurors to assimilate it all. Yep. They simulate it all, is what told me. They're going to stereotyping. This can trigger stereotyping strategies, right? So it's to bring up this idea that it can make it more difficult for jurors to be careful and critical instead of stereotyping. And as a whole, because usually with these questions, they kind of wanted you to tell how it works in the argument itself. So as a whole, what that does is it presents a problem for Brackle's argument and it undermines his position and supports this other position about um, why videotape testimony might be better, right? So this is just supporting evidence for an opposing position to Brackle. Or you can just say that this is information that undermines Brackle's position. Um, so yeah, we could keep it as simple as what is happening in this paragraph, which is that this piece was brought up to show that jurors might be inclined to stereotype instead of being critical and actually getting the truth. But as a whole, it's undermining Brackle. Let's see. They do it to reinforce the notion of Brackle's critics, okay, that videotaped witnesses are adequately aware of the penalties of. Nope, we're about truth. The perjury stuff was real quick and easy. Okay, this information is brought up to identify the main support presented for the superiority of live testimony in relation to videotape testimony. Okay, well, let's break this down because that's confusing. What is it saying? The main support for the superiority of live testimony in relation to videotape testimony. So live is the stuff Brackle's going for. Videotaped is what the opponents will be saying. And the main support for why live is better than videotaped. No. Remember what I said? This information was supposed to be showing why videotaped might be better. So just no. That's going the opposite of what this actually did. So I gotta take these slow. Because that might confuse some people and they might choose to think it's opposite. But no, this is saying that the author mentions this stuff to support in the main support, but just support. Let's start there. The idea that live is better than videotaped. And that's not what's happening. This supports the idea that videotaped might be better than live because live gives too much information to the jurors to be able to determine truth instead of stereotyping and being critical. Yeah, I said that funky, but y'all get what I mean. Okay, C. Suggests that the probability that witnesses will practice deceit is typically very high. They bring this up to suggest that the probability of, huh? Suggests that the probability that witnesses will practice deceit is typically very high. No. D. Okay, let me explain that one. Sorry. I'm just gonna keep moving on. This is saying that this evidence was brought up to support this idea that witnesses are gonna lie. And again, we already said what it's doing. It's not doing that. This evidence is brought up to bring up the idea that there's too much information in person and it leaves jurors in a stereotyping. Okay. It's brought up to call into question an assumption that underlies Brackle's arguments concerning videotape testimony. This might be it. So it's undermining Brackle's point, right? Calling into question an assumption that he makes is something that will undermine his position. So that's in line with what I was guessing before. Now to break this down and just make sure I'm clear what this is saying, what is the assumption that would be underlying his argument that we be calling into question? The assumption would be that, oh, um, the assumption is that we're able to get truth better from in person versus videotaped. They even call that out as an assumption at one point in here. I'm not going to scroll to that because I already remember that. Oh, presume. Presume like leads into assumption. Um, It's related to. It's not the exact same thing, but it's related to. And so calling it into question means it's like putting on the table, like, is that really the case when you have this information on the table? Question, right? Um, yeah, I like this one. So it's calling into question this assumption that in person is better than videotaped, and it does, because this point says, well, when you have in person, there's too much information. So is in person better? Grapple with your assumption about videotape versus in person? Yeah, I like this a lot. Okay, E is brought up to imply that it may be impossible. I'm already not liking this. Impossible to do what? We weren't that strong with anything here. It may be impossible to know the range of cues used by jurors in detecting deceptive. Huh? To impossible to know the range of cues used by jurors. We weren't concerned with knowing the full range of cues um to detect deceptive testimony. We don't care. It's like, can you get enough to be able to tell whether or not somebody's lying? We don't care about the full range and what that looks like. So just know. This is D, 100%. All right. The primary function of the second paragraph. See, what did I tell y'all? Didn't I tell y'all you need to know what's happening in these paragraphs? What happened in the second paragraph again? Actually, at this point, I've talked so much, it's kind of like, huh? But I can very quickly what happened? Okay, yeah. So this is where we bring up the critics. Remember, first paragraph we present Brackle view. Second paragraph we're on his butt. We're on his behind. Um, and we start bringing up the critics and what they have to say about what Brackle has to say. So the second paragraph, that's what we're doing. And let me be more careful just in case I'm missing anything. The critics argue. Oh. Let me be even more specific on what's happening here. The critics are directly addressing some of Brackle's claims and saying, probably not. Because Brackle says, oh, with this videotape stuff, we have to, people forget that they are under penalty of law if they lie. And that uh the jurors can tell the truth. So they bring up something else a little bit. But right, this is where the critics are like, you can get over the perjury thing by just doing a reminder. And being on videotape is much less stressful than being in court in person, which means we might get more information. All right. So the primary function of this paragraph is to bring up some issues that exist with Brackle's position. So that's the answer. Let's look for it. Detail opposition to a claim outlined in the first paragraph. Think the detail makes me hesitate a little bit because it's like it's not too detailed in and of itself, but there are details. So it's just like I take this as describe more generally. Describe opposition to a claim outlined in the first paragraph, and then boom, that's the answer. But let's look at the rest and be careful. Illustrate the primary support. So the primary function of the second paragraph is to illustrate the primary support for the argument outlined in the first. No, this is not supportive of that at all. And so they would be showing the primary support for this argument. No, we're undermining it. C, acknowledge the strength of the argument outlined in the. No, we're saying this is crap. D, align the author's stance with that of the opponents of the claims outlined in the first paragraph. No, not yet. We weren't clear. Remember when I was reading this, we were questioning if the author was going to go one way or the other. It sounded like they might be leaning that way, but we didn't align the author stance with the opponents until like, was it three or four? I think it was three. Yeah. Yeah. Remember the third paragraph was out. That's what the kind of author is starting to lean in. I remember saying that earlier. So yeah, that's the third paragraph, not the second one. So boom. E, describe the recommendations of the opponents of the claims outlined in the first paragraph. The recommendations? No, no, no. We didn't talk about the recommendations. We just said like how they stand against it, like some points about them being opposed to it. I feel like I moved that a little fast, but yeah, that's not what we did. Okay, next. It can most reasonably be inferred from the passage that some of Brackle's critics believe that the full range of cues associated with live testimony. Okay, this question is asking us to. Mm, some of Brackle's critics believe that, and this is an inferred question. Okay. Oh, the full range of cues. Here we go with this again. Associated with live testimony. Okay. So I'm gonna have to look for something that hints at what the people that are in favor of videotape testimony have to say about full range of cues with live testimony. I can already say that where they stand about the full range of cues associated with live testimony is that they're too much. Um, well, they don't necessarily say that, but I would believe that they might say something like that because of the evidence that was brought up. Was that here? Great deal. Yeah. In court, when a great deal of information, hard for them to assimilate, stereotyping strategies, factors other than deceit, aka anxiety, can mimic signs of deceit. Um, so the full range of cues can be, and see here, this is where we would have to make inferences if you want to connect it back to, well, you don't have to do it, but like what I'm saying is, I'm inclined to make inferences in this part about what some of the critics of Brackle might say, because these are further supporting pieces of this opposing view that videotaping might be better. So, what a critic might have to say about the full range of cues to support this idea that videotaping is better is, hey, um, the full range of cues in live testimony is too much. Well, the full range of cues and live testimony can be confused with anxiety. Or it might have something to do with this visual piece at the end. So those are my guesses, and we'll see what's here. Hey, um, full range of cues often causes witness to contradict themselves. No, we didn't talk about contradiction. We just said may show signs of deceit. Well, show signs of anxiety that look like deceit. Okay. Usually disguises the evidence of perjury when it does occur. No, that would be disguising people lying, and like, no. We said that it can make people seem like they're lying when they're not. Is often consciously exploited by witnesses to commit perjury. No, we didn't talk about some mastermind witness that's like, I'm gonna use these cues to my advantage so I can lie and get away with it. No, we didn't do that. D, often causes jurors to become complacent. No. Complacent's like, what am I looking for? What's the synonym for complacent? Like settling or like, yeah, like settled. Just no. They better be E. Sometimes make jurors apt to perceive a truthful witness as deceitful. Boom. Yeah, that's it. Apt, I know this word. Why is it blanking on me right now? Oh, likely to incline to cater towards doing something in that line. Yeah, like they're inclined to perceive a truthful witness as deceitful. But even without remembering what apps says means exactly, you know these ones are wrong so strongly, and this sounds right. Jurors do something to perceive a truthful witness as deceitful. Remember, that's what our guess was, right? Jurors perceive a truthful witness as deceitful. Why? Because the anxiety thing. So that's the answer. Period. Six. The passage most strongly implies that the aspects of a witness's behavior that are crucial to a juror's ability to determine the veracity of a testimony. I read that too fast. What did that just say? Um, okay. The passage most strongly implies, okay, so it's not going to explicitly state, it's going to imply, got to take an extra step, or leans in this direction of saying that the aspects of a witness's behavior that are crucial to a juror's ability to determine the veracity, the truth of testimony. Okay. So the passage says that the parts of a witness's behavior that are crucial to a juror's ability to determine whether or not they're telling the truth. Okay, what might that be? Um, it's probably gonna have something to do again with those cues, right? Like the aspects of a witness's behavior that are crucial for a juror to be able to determine the truth. They're gonna have to not be anxious so that the cues don't get confused for lying when they're just anxious. They're gonna have to, yeah, they're gonna have to like look and sound like they're telling the truth and not have too much information for the juror or the jury to have to deal with. Something like that is what I'm guessing, but I'm gonna take it down here because I'm doing too much. But I do understand, right? The question is gonna be asking me to say that the passage is gonna hint at something about the witness's behavior, some characteristics of the witness behavior that lends itself to, or that like is important to a juror being able to tell whether or not they're telling the truth. So, what does the passage have to say about witness behavior that's important to a juror being able to tell whether or not the person's telling the truth? Okay. Aspects of the behavior that are crucial are to some extent the sort of thing that is capturable by videotape. Ooh, okay. So this is where we're going with this. Let me slow it down. So, are the aspects of the behavior crucial to determining the truth able to be capturable by videotape? Yes. Yes. And this might be the answer because remember, part of where we started was saying, oh, well, videotape allows for us to be able to not deal with people repressing memories or forgetting stuff. And so a videotape would be able to capture some of that. Well, this has to do with truth. So, like, we're talking about the truth pieces. I mean, yeah, that's still an answer to the yes, because when we go down here, um, the amount of nonverbal videotape transmission could be employed without reducing jurors' ability to detect deception. Less information about nonverbal cues, and then the visual cues may distract from other cues that indicate mendacity. Yeah, so I think a combination of these two paragraphs here can make you come to a conclusion about videotape can capture enough where, but not too much, right? They can capture enough, but not too much. They capture enough where jurors can like take the information and be able to determine truth or non-truth, but not too much to where it's too much information and they start to stereotype. I think that the passage would imply that. Let's go through the rest and see if I hesitate beyond that, but I think that's the one. Okay. Aspects of the behavior crucial to telling the truth or determining the truth are generally mislead jurors more often than they assist them. Aspects of the witness behavior crucial. Generally mislead more often than they assist. No, no, they don't. It's when there's too much of them at once. But like generally mislead means like all of them, no matter how many there are. And that's not what the passage is saying. It's saying that like if there's too many of them at once, that we might do that, which is very different from saying that the aspects of the behavior generally mislead more often than assist. We've been a whole different argument in a boat with that. So no. Okay, so the aspects of the behavior to determine the truth are for the most part unique to the courtroom setting. No, that would be working against the whole idea of videotaping being a competitor. Okay, D, tend to make the testimony of witnesses more credible to a jury. The aspects of the behavior crucial to the ability to determine the truth tend to make the testimony of witnesses more credible. No, not necessarily. Um, because again, those aspects of their behavior can go either way. That's where we stand with the argument presented in this passage. It can go either way. Um, they can be deceiving. I don't want to say that. They can be confusing for a jury to determine whether or not somebody's being deceitful in certain contexts. So, no. E, are much less evident in situations in which a witness is somewhat relaxed. The aspects of their behavior, crucial to determine the truth, are much less evident in situations in which a witness is somewhat relaxed. No. When someone's relaxed, this article implied that those cues, those aspects of their behavior are to determine the truth from the juror's perspective are more evident in the wait. Yeah, more evident when they're relaxed than not relaxed. What we said was when they have the anxiety, then those things about veracity, those aspects that show veracity are much less evident because anxiety can be confused for deceit and, well, the forgetfulness is, again, I didn't have to do with deceit, so it's not it. So it's A. Yeah. All right. Hopefully, this is the last one before we go to the science passage. It can be inferred from the passage that Brackle would be most likely to endorse which one of the following? A. The needed testimony of witnesses who live a great distance from the court. Wait. I moved too fast. Ooh, y'all didn't say nothing? Where were y'all at? Okay. It can be inferred from the passage that Brackle would be most likely to endorse which one of the following. What did I miss? I was supposed to guess. Or like set myself up for the win to guess. Or not guess, but to observe. So this question wants me to again make another inference from the past. So we didn't have three of these inferences back to back essentially. So they're going to take from the passage, look at the passage and make another step, make another guess from that. And I want to guess about something that Brackle would say, or that Brackle would be most likely to endorse. Ooh, this is fun. So what's something that Brackle would be most likely to endorse? Okay. My guess before I get over here is that Brackle's going to endorse something like, um, get more people in person in court. Duh. Whatever he can do to get people in person, like that's Brackle's whole position is in person is better. And so he wants to do whatever it takes to get people in person and away from videotape. He might have something to say about some of these like counterpoints, but all that's going to lend itself into saying he wants people to show up in person. So that's what we're going to be looking for, something that's leaning into getting people in court and in person. Um, yeah. Or something that like helps jurors out when they're in person. The whole point is being in person. Okay. So the needed testimony of witnesses who live a great distance from the court is videotaped in their hometowns to save time. No, no. I'll finish it. To save time and large expense of time and appear in court. No. Brackle doesn't like the videotaping. He's gonna say, pay the time and the money to get them in court. Because we need them in court. Their testimony's gonna be compromised. Get them in court. Pay that money. Okay. B, a local court establishes a policy dictating that if any witness testifies via videotape in a particular case, then all witnesses must no. Okay, we getting away from the videotape. He's gonna be like, oh, that's a nightmare. As many people in person as possible, not the opposite. C, a local court establishes a policy whereby witnesses are given the choice of providing their testimony live in court or in the form of a written document. No, no, he's gonna be like the written stuff. They just not gonna lie, and people won't be able to tell. Mm-mm. And why are we giving them a choice? Come in person. That's practical. D, a witness in a case who was medically exempted from giving live testimony asked to provide the testimony via videotape rather than in writing because of the witness's skepticism about the adequacy of written testimony. Brackle might be okay with this because it's as close as you can get to the in person. And Brackle might also be skeptical about the written testimony, given his concerns about people forgetting about the perjury piece. So maybe like they remember a little bit better with the videotape. And also, that gives at least some body language. It's better if it's in person. But like with written testimony, we get none of that. So Brackle might actually be okay with that. And he's like, yeah, me too, bro. Me too. E, a local court establishes a policy dictating that all witness testimony must be presented live in court unless there are sufficient medical reasons to excuse a witness from appearing personally. Oh. That's it. Yeah, so remember I was like, he might, right? Um, but we're talking about most likely. It's definitely E. Here's why. If E was going to be crap like A, B, and C, then I could see Brackle saying, okay, sure, go ahead and do videotape instead of written. But Brackle, remember, Brackle doesn't like either one of these. Brackle wants you in person. And so when it comes down to E, and we're forcing everybody to come in person, unless you got a medical excuse, and that's going to be rare, this is the kind of thing Brackle's going to be behind, not this thing in comparison. You might be okay with this, right? So like, um, but this is secondary to this position, right? So this would be an example of somebody who has a medical exemption and they're like, let me do videotape rather than writing. And Brackle might be like, sure. But like at the first place, we want everybody to come in person, period. So it's E. Yeah. Oh my God. Another one on this one? Okay. Which one of the following would, if true, tend most to support the criticisms of Brackle's views in the passage? Um, if true, tend to most support the criticism of Brackle's views. Okay. So, ugh, here they're asking us to look for something that's in line with the critics. So we're gonna look for something that's in line with the position of videotape is might be better. Videotape might be better. What's gonna support that idea? Um, or something that supports one of these criticisms we already had, like more explicitly brought up already, which is um the criticisms that were brought up specifically to his point, mostly here. Wait, no, these responses to his critiques. So this is a criticism at this point where stress in court might make them forget or repress information. Then another criticism that they had was oh, just all these things they have to say about just court being bad, right? Like, oh, there's too much information in court. Um, oh, anxiety can be confused for it, right? So like all those things we have to say about what's wrong with the in-person pressure or in-person circumstances are going to be further supported down here. Okay. And we're going to take them to be true to determine whether or not they support that opposing side of what do you think might be better. Okay. Oh, specific guess because you have to look. But I know I'm looking for. A. People are more likely to be sincere with those in their immediate presence than with those not in their immediate presence. No. That's supporting Brackle's side, right? Immediate presence, like I'm right there in your face. So if people are more sincere, meaning more honest and genuine, with people who are right in front of them versus people who are not right in front of them, then that leads us more into saying they need to be in person then. Okay. People who are in a state of anxiety tend to be more cautious about what they say than are people who feel confident. That might play into this because if you are in anxiety, and we remember we said, oh, I'm so sorry, y'all. Oof, parenthood. Okay. Oh, remember what we said? When people are in person, the idea was like it's more stressful. So if you're more anxious because you're in person, then you're being more cautious about what you say, then we want to put you in a situation where you're not going to be as anxious, which might be videotaping, is more comfortable, right? They said the being in person is more stressful. And when it's anxiety about addressing a suspicious audience, which can be even more anxious in person. So when you're on videotape and you might be more confident, then you're gonna be less careful about what you say and just more inclined to just tell the truth as it is. So this is a maybe. Um, there's some room for like get away from that, but I'll leave that for now. I'll even mark it. Might be it. People who feel intimidated by a situation are more likely to say what they think is expected of them, oh, than to say what they believe. So what this would say is that people who are intimidated, which talked about it being more intimidating to be in person, are more likely to say what is expected of them than what they believe, which sounds like they're lying. So if people who are intimidated are more likely to lie versus say what the truth is, then that might be the answer. And I'll come back between B and C later. I don't feel secure in one way or the other yet. D, traumatic events can cause those who experience them to suppress the memory of the occurrence of these events. Okay, no. I mean, even if being in person is traumatic, like you'll just forget that later. But this is trying to play on the fact that they talked about repressed memories earlier, and it's just not what we're looking for. The prospect of performing in front of a camera causes heightened anxiety in many people. Oh, that's bad. That's not supporting the criticisms because that would mean that like we got more opportunity for confusion about the jurors being able to tell if people are telling the truth or not. So that would mean that being in person is better. So no, it's definitely not that one. So let's go back to B and C. So B says people who are in a state of anxiety tend to be more cautious about what they say than are people who feel confident. And C says people who feel intimidated by a situation are more likely to say what they think is expected of them than to say what they believe. Okay, so with B, it says if you're anxious, you're gonna be more cautious. And then C says if you're intimidated, that you're likely to say something that's contrary to what you believe. I think it's C, because C is more inclined, like that's so it's not necessarily lying. Um, you could be saying still something that's truthful, but like framed around what other people expect rather than like the truth. I just feel like C is more inclined to like lying, and B is like you might be more cautious, but maybe you like still say the truth. And maybe out of your cautiousness, like you're more careful, cautious to tell the truth, right? So I'm gonna go with C here. Yeah. Because again, cautious about what they say, you just might be more cautious to tell the truth. It just means you're being more careful. It doesn't mean that you're lying, but this, it sounds more like lying. Okay. Finally, we're here at the science passage. Hello. Okay. So this is what y'all asked for. Let's get into it. Let me yawn really quick. Okay. Increases in the amount of carbon dioxide, CO2, and other trace gases in the Earth's atmosphere can contribute to what has been called greenhouse warming. All right, listen, this ain't too bad. We've heard about greenhouse warming, now called global warming, climate change. We hear these terms. That's what I want you to do when you read science. Familiarize it, please. Something you absolutely no context for. Just find a way to visualize, find a way to make it your own. That's the key. Okay. Increases in carbon dioxide and other trace gases in Earth's atmosphere can contribute to what has been called greenhouse warming because those compounds allow the sun's energy to reach the surface of the Earth, thereby warming it. This is a long sentence, but prevent much of that energy from being re-radiated to outer space. Why is the sentence so long? I'm gonna have to reread that again because I was just like, Jesus, it's one, two, three, four, five, 6 lines. Now remember, they said that when CO2 goes up, it can contribute to greenhouse warming. Well, CO2 and other trace gases, which might be important to remember, can make greenhouse warming worse. It can make things warmer. And here's why. Because those compounds allow the sun's energy to reach the surface of the earth. So there's something about trace gases, because it says and other trace gases, something about these trace gases that allow sun's energy to reach earth and warming it up. Oh, but prevent much of that energy from being re-radiated to outer space. Okay, so it's two things that's happening. So those gases bring the sun's energy in and stop it from being able to get back out. So I wonder what the normal state is. Now I'm inclined, because I've read so many of these passages before, and I know how global warming works, but I'm wondering if they're going to frame it this way. What is the normal case? Is the normal case where if it wasn't so much of that gas, the sun's energy would hit the earth and just come back out? That's what I think. Um, but I'm left wondering, what is it normally if it's not under those conditions of greenhouse warming? Okay. But what we do know about greenhouse warming is that the amount of CO2 and other trace gases brings sun's energy in and stops it from getting back out to space. Okay, so it's trapped. Traps the energy. Measuring devices set up at several locations around the world have revealed a 20% increase in atmospheric CO2 over the course of the past century. Okay. So we got some measuring devices around Earth, and CO2 is going up 20% over the last 100 years. From 290 parts per million in 1880 to 352 parts per million in 1989. Okay. It's a little over a century. Okay. Several studies agree that it is plausible that the CO2 content of the atmosphere may well double from its 1880 level by around the middle of the 21st century. Hmm. Okay. So in the last 100 years, uh, CO2, so we're just going to focus on CO2, which is why I guess they distinguish it from the other trace gases earlier. It's given CO2, CO2. Okay. Anyway, so we're focusing on CO2, and it says over the last 100 years, CO2 has gone up to 20%. And they're going to guess that over the next, okay, we don't know how many years we are out from the 21st century, in the middle of the 21st century, but by the middle of the 21st century, it's going to double from what it was before. So right now we're at 20% higher, and they're saying by the middle of the 21st century, we're going to be 200% higher. That's doubling it. 100%. Oh, wait, what do you mean 100% higher? This is 100% of what it was before. It's something like that. It's going to double. It'll be twice as much what it was in 1880, which is 20% more of what it was in 1880. Okay, great. I mean, not great for the earth, but you understand. It's going to get nasty. It's going to get bad. Okay. To project how much the global temperature will increase in response to a doubling of atmospheric CO2 should be simple. Oh, is it not? Should be simple. Then how do we rely on this? Okay. Since the CO2 content has increased by about 20% over the past century, we should be able, here we go with this, what happened? We should be able to observe the increases in global temperature during the same period and base future projections on that data. Okay, why can't we? The prevailing view is that the climactic record over the past century for the entire globe reveals a net increase in temperature ranging from zero point 0.5 to 1 degree Fahrenheit. Here we go, these long sentences again. What is it? So they said that we should be able to guess. Oh, okay, hold on. So, okay. Where we came from in the first paragraph is that we can guess that it's plausible to think that the CO2 is going to double from what it was in 1880 in the middle of the 21st century. But this next thing is not just measuring or not just guessing the CO2 amount, but also guessing how much the global temperature will increase in relation to that CO2. Okay. Um, so, and they're saying that they should be simple to calculate the temperature increase that will go along with that CO2 increase based on what we saw before with the 20% increase in CO2 and how the temperature went up based on that. Okay, I'm still wondering if there's something holding us back because it says should and should. And so it's making me think that there might be some problems. And I can already think of where there might be some gaps, but I'll leave that. One of them is if the temperature goes up from that 20%, what if the rate like exponentially increases as like there's more CO2? Anyway, okay, so should be simple to determine the temperature based on what we saw before. We should be able to observe this during the same period. Yeah, we should be able to observe the increase in global temperature during the same period and base future projections on that data. Cool. The prevailing view is that the climactic record over the past century for the entire globe, okay, look at that century from 1880 to 1989, reveals a net increase in temperature ranging from zero point 0.5 to 1 degree Fahrenheit. We don't care about Celsius. I'm sorry. We just don't. Unless they ask me about Celsius. I'm American. Sorry. Um, but set against this conclusion, okay, let me run the sentence back. So what they're saying is that the observation we made from looking at the last century when we saw the CO2 go up by 20% is that the temperature went up somewhere between zero point 0.5 and 1 degree. Okay. Well, this is a prevailing view. Interesting. And here we get a but. But set against this conclusion is the fact that data gathered over the past century in North America, where observations are numerous and accurate, does not confirm such an increase. So they had a limited measuring system. hmm And even if the temperature rise is real, another puzzle remains. Is the rise in global temperatures a natural fluctuation or a result of an increase of the increase in greenhouse gases? Okay, so here we got some problems. So the first problem is that the data gathered in North America doesn't confirm it. I guess for some reason, North America is a flawed place to get the measurements from. So we're going to need to get more information in order to actually confirm this measurement of zero point 0.5 to 1 degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature. And a second issue is if this is the case and that was right, is the rise in the global temperatures natural or did it come from the CO2? Right? So, like, was the Earth always going to get higher by zero point 0.5 to 1 degree Fahrenheit? Or was it actually coming from CO2 raising by 20%? So we have a lot more work to do in order to be able to like really stand in, oh, well, if the CO2 goes up, we know the temperature's gonna go up by zero point 0.5 to 1 degree. So we should see a similar happenstance when it comes to if by the middle of the 21st century, the CO2 content doubles, we should be able to tell about how much degrees it's going to increase too. I'm not doing the math. I don't care about the math, right? We just need to understand the relationships and what's being said. Okay. So I'm guessing we're going to have to answer these questions or we're going to make more problems. Let's see. Because of inconclusive data and the complexity of the problem, some scientists predict an increase as small as 2 degrees Fahrenheit, 1 degree Celsius, in the average global temperature over the next half century. Okay. So they want to be conservative in their measurements about how much the temperature is going to go up because we don't know how much we can rely on the one that came from information that was from North America and whether or not like it's actually linked to greenhouse gases or if it's just natural. Okay, so some people are being conservative. And I'm saying that because they said as small as in relation to the inconclusive data and complexity. All right. Whereas others predict increases of up to 9 degrees Fahrenheit. So that might be based on like naturally what you would assume if you assume that this is accurate. 5 degrees Celsius. It makes a great difference. Yeah, 2 degrees versus 9. Um, Makes a great difference whether the actual increase is at the low or high end of this range. Although human beings are probably resilient enough to adapt to the effects of an increase of approximately 2 degrees Fahrenheit, an increase of 9 degrees Fahrenheit is believed to be the difference in temperature that separates the end of the last great ice age, 12,000 years ago from the present. Oh, okay. So what they said there is on the low end of this measurement, we can probably survive that. But if we have the 9 degree difference, that's about the same difference as what it was in the last ice age to now. So like when the ice age stopped and the earth heated up, it was about 9 degrees lower. That's what I'm reading. Yeah, the ice age is about 9 degrees lower than what the Earth is now. So imagine it getting 9 degrees higher from what it is right now to something else. We're probably gonna die. Ooh, let me say, we're probably not gonna be here anymore. And it's probably gonna be something else that's living, if anything is living at that point. Okay, that's scary. In light of such uncertainty, the wisest policy is not to forestall action. Yeah, get some more measurements. Figure this out. Steps that make sense for economic or environmental reasons, besides greenhouse warming, such as replacing fossil fuel energy with solar energy, could be taken first. Huh? Okay. Whether or not climate warming is taking place. The way they phrase this is confusing to me, but I get what they're trying to say. So steps that make sense for economic or environmental reasons. But oh, so they're saying like we can do things that are good economically or just in general for the environment and not considering greenhouse warming, which okay. Um, could be taken first, whether or not climate warming is taking place. But like if you're not doing it for greenhouse warming, then what's the point? The only thing that makes me think about framing things this way is to like convince people to do it for these reasons and not this one because you don't know if this is actually happening. So I guess, right? This is how you would actually get those things through. Um, okay. I'm still like, if it's not happening, okay, but you just do this for the economy or the environment in general. Okay, great. Then, as scientific knowledge grows and uncertainties are reduced, more costly measures could be taken if warranted. Hence, closely tied policy decisions to the latest information available. Okay, so scientists and others have aptly called this type of action a no regrets policy. Okay, so we're trying to just be very pragmatic. We're trying to be very practical with what we suggest to be what we suggest to do with the information that we do have. So, long story short, we know how greenhouse warming works. And with the information that we have about greenhouse warming, it's sketchy right now, but alarming. So, to play it safe, but not spend too much money for something that might not be happening, according to this article, um, what we should do practically is still take steps to do things that are good for the environment and the economy that could also help if greenhouse warming is a thing. Um, right? So like do things that are like that make sense for us to do anyway, but they could also help with not making things worse on this greenhouse warming thing if it's happening. And then when we get more information, as we get more accurate data, we get more reliable data, then we can, and if the data then says, yes, these things are linked to greenhouse warming, these things are linked to the carbon dioxide, things are going to get worse. And this is the extent to which they're going to get worse. We don't know if it's 9 degrees or the 1 degree or whatever. We don't know. But like once we do have more reliable information, more clear information, then we can start doing more direct measures towards greenhouse warming, assuming that that's an actual thing to be worried about and to do something about. So they call it no regrets policy, right? That can kind of make sense because if it's not happening, you were doing things that were just good for the environment and the economy anyway. But if it is happening, at least you were doing some things that were also going to help with that situation. And then you can do the more costly things if it turns out to be something we need to be worried about. Okay. We're not going to argue for or against this wherever we stand. We're not going to argue about if it's happening or not. And how dare you say it's not happening or, yeah, it's not real. Like, we're not going there. We're not bringing all that in. But what we are going to do is just understand what happened in this article. So, in the first article, we set the stage for how greenhouse warming works, and how much the carbon dioxide might raise over the next many years. By the middle of the 21st century, we might go from the 20% increase we saw to a double increase because I don't know if it's really the 100% increase or the 200. It'll be 200% of what it was. But I think it's a 100% increase. 100 to that 100. I think that's right, but whatever. It's gonna double. So the first paragraph is setting the tone for like how greenhouse warming works with the CO2 and what we expect by the middle of the 21st century from what we see nowish. And then the second paragraph talks about how we should be able to measure temperature increases in relation to that CO2 increase estimate and what that could mean for the earth. Um, well, the what it could mean for the earth is more so here. What I mean here is like the second paragraph talks about how the CO2 could be linked to the temperature, right? Um, and how we can, how we should be able to say something about what the temperature would be from observing what's already happened, right? We should be able to observe increases in global temperature from looking at the CO2. And the prevailing view says the temperature has gone from zero point 0.5 to 1 degree. Wait, past century. Yeah. Over the past century, we saw zero point 0.5 to 1. And then this is where we, okay. I was getting confused between the second paragraph and the third one. So the first paragraph was really set the tone for how greenhouse warming works, and what we saw from 1800s to the 1900s and what we set to see in the future in terms of that increase. The second paragraph talks about, okay, that CO2 increase is also linked to temperature. And here's what we saw about the temperature increase from 1880 to 1980. And so we should be able to take that theoretically and say something about the temperature increase up until the middle of the 21st century. However, there's problems. One, the data's from North America. I don't know why that's a problem, but they just say it's a problem. And then two, uh, how do we know that this isn't a natural increase in temperature for the Earth versus it being linked to the CO2, right? So we should be able to observe things about the weather. I mean, not the weather, but about the temperature increase. But here's some problems of why we're hesitating on that. Okay. So one said the stage, two said, well, we should be able to do, but we're just questioning it. Three says, here's the problem with the problem, right? Um, because that information is shaky, We don't know if we should go with the more safe estimates of 1 to 2 degrees Fahrenheit increase, or if we need to be expecting something like 9. 2, we can live with. 9, we cannot live with. So that's a big, big gap. That's what the third paragraph is saying. And so in the fourth paragraph, what we do is we say, here are the practical steps we're going to take because what we see in the third paragraph it's too different in the estimates. So fourth paragraph says, let's take these steps, these safe steps, this no regrets policy to just play it safe until we get more reliable data. Okay. And so I would say that the overall idea here is that greenhouse warming, we're not sure about the impact. We're not sure about greenhouse warming and Earth. I wouldn't even say greenhouse warming generally. I think touch so much on CO2. I would say we're not sure about CO2's impact on Earth and greenhouse warming. So we should play it safe until we get further clarification. That's the main idea. We're not sure about CO2 and this global warming stuff. So let's play it safe until we figure it out. That's the main idea. All right. And which one of the following best expresses the main idea of the passage? Play it safe until there's more data. Approaching the problem of greenhouse warming with a no regrets policy encourages government agencies to implement affordable but most likely ineffective no. The whole point is that it should be effective either way. That's why it's a no regrets policy. Um, oh, but like, okay, I guess you could you might think this if you didn't think it was a no regrets like they say it's no regrets, but like you don't actually think it's no regrets, but the author doesn't seem to have an issue with that. They said aptly called, so like that's like in this context, like appropriately. Or maybe not. Now this made me want to redo my understanding of apt because I had a strong understanding and all this talking, and I feel like I done lost it. So I'm gonna relook that word up at the end of this. But generally, like the tone about this for the author in relation to this position is like the author seems to be in alignment with what they have to say. They also agree that there's a lot of uncertainty. They also tend to like lean into um this sounds about right. Or at least they agree with this level of uncertainty and this is what we're taking as a step. But I don't see anything from the author indicating that they don't agree with this policy, that they're critical of this policy. It just sounds like this is the natural step from all the uncertainty that's on the table. So they're not necessarily 100% for it, but um they're definitely not arguing against it. Okay. Inconclusive data concerning the rise in global temperature over the next half century, okay, suggests that politicians should wait until all uncertainties are resolved before taking action. No. No, 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 no. No, no, no. We still take action. We take measured and careful action. Costly measures must be taken soon. No. They said don't do anything costly until we figure it out. But let's finish it. To prevent further increases in greenhouse gases and thus a dangerous rise in global temperatures. No. Wait to play it safe. Because the uncertainty, we're going to play it safe. D, given the lack of agreement about the effects of greenhouse gases on global temperature, okay, shaky ground, the best policy is to implement sensible measures now and respond to new scientific knowledge that appears. Yes, yes. Because because the information is shaky, play it safe. Yes. Make a play, but a safe play. E, scientists will be able to provide a more accurate estimate of the probable effects of greenhouse warming over the next half century. That's not the main point, bro. We didn't talk about, oh, if you did this, you'd be able to make more accurate estimate. That's not the main point. There's a small point about where we're concerned about not having the right thing, but like that's not the main point. But let's just read this for funsies. Okay, to be able to provide more probable estimate of probable effects or accurate estimate of probable effects of greenhouse warming over the next half century, if politicians took steps now to eliminate other environmental problems that contribute to global warming. No, 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 no. This is D. Okay. The author refers to the meteorological. I just want to say, you know what I love about reading comp? I don't have to go back and read anything over here because I already know what happened. With logical reasoning, you gotta go back and read a whole new thing, get it together, go back over here. Reading comp, I'm flying because I remember what happened. Beautiful. Anyway, the author refers to the meteorological data gathered in North America over the past century in order to. Okay. So I remember this one, I was like, okay, it's from North America. Something's wrong with that. We don't know what's wrong. That's what they did it. They did it to indicate that something is wrong with the fact that our data comes from North America. Sounds like we need broader information. Um, Observations are numerous and accurate in North America does not confirm the increase. So they're doing that to show that the increase that we think is the case that happened on the Earth so far is not confirmed in and of itself. Like we think that the Earth has increased by zero point 0.5 to 1 degree. We don't actually know. That might just be North America. But what about the rest of the Earth? And when you average it or do whatever you need to do there, might not have gone up that higher. It might be higher. We don't know. But like this is North American data. We need it for the Earth, right? So the point of bringing that up is to show that there's a problem with relying on current data as it stands, to show that there's a gap in our knowledge about greenhouse warming, to show that we're on shaky ground with being able to assume a ton about greenhouse warming and to understand that there's a link. Like, we don't know as much. We don't know that much. We don't know that much. That's what I'm going to stick with. Okay. So it's to show that we don't know that much. A, they bring it up to show how differing views on the extent of the rise in global temperature can be resolved. Oh, no. To show how differing views on the extent of the rise in global temperature can be resolved. That didn't bring up anything to show how things can be resolved. It further made things sticky and complicated. Yeah, no. And we weren't even worried about like resolving different views. I mean, no, we were worried about that a little bit, but like, nah, that makes them more differing. Some people are like, "Oh, use North American data," and some people are like, "No, it's not indicative," right? So it's gonna make more problems, not fixing any problems. B, argue that any warming detected over the past century has most likely been the result of a natural climatic fluctuation. No, it's to say that we don't know if it's natural or if it's linked. Eh. C, argue against the prevailing view that the amount of atmospheric CO2 has increased by about 20% over the past century. No, we weren't trying to argue against that. We're just here to say that, hey, we don't know if the Earth actually increased. The 20% of the CO2, that's, no, we didn't do that. It was about the temperature thing. Um, D, suggests that there should be more numerous and accurate observation points outside of North America. Yes, 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 right? We need it outside of here. Um, yeah, that's what I was saying. I was like, it seems like you're saying we need to go outside of North America. Okay, E, present evidence to cast doubt on the view, that global temperature has, increased over the past century. Ooh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Tricky, tricky. So did they bring it up to say that there should be more observation points outside of North America? Or did they bring it up to show that the global temperature, there's a doubt about global temperature increasing? We gotta take this slow. Okay, so to present evidence that casts doubt on the view, the author brings up this information to cast doubt on the view that global temperature has increased. over the past century. I don't like that. Here's why. The author wasn't set against the idea that the temperature has increased. If the author brought this up in order to cast doubt on the temperature increasing, it makes it sound like the author has a problem with saying that the global temperature has increased. Like they're saying it didn't increase or it lowered. Just more so it didn't increase, whatever that might mean. Um, so that's not really what we were doing. The author brought it up to say that this information alone doesn't confirm it, right? Not to cast doubt on the idea that it's increased. I think the author's still okay with the fact that things might have increased. The other part of this is that like I think the author thinks that it could be real and that the question is more so not did it increase or not, but like the extent to which it increased. Oh, and then look over here. It says, and even if the temperature rise is real, another puzzle remains. Is the rise of global temperature the natural fluctuation or results of increasing greenhouse gases? So, right? I just feel like this will be putting the author in a position of being anti-temperature increase. It's pretty strong on that side of things. And I don't like that. Now, going back to D, suggests that there should be more numerous and accurate observation points outside of North America. I just feel like that's more directly related to what we're doing here. Like, you can make a big picture point about this, but I feel like if you're really sticking to what's actually being done here and how this is literally being used in the space that it's being used, without having to like piece together things and make assumptions, what I see is that they're saying we need more places outside of North America. Set against this conclusion that there was a net increase in temperature from zero point 0.5 to 1 degree. So against that point is the fact that data gathered over the past century in North America, where observations are numerous and accurate, does not confirm such an increase. So it puts the increase into question, which passed out. Eh, I'm actually going to. Here's why I changed my mind. When I read this sentence back out again, um, my assumption actually is coming from the place of like, I'm assuming you want me to go outside of North America. But here, when I read this out loud, Sedekins' conclusion, or just read it again in general. Sedekins' conclusion is the fact that data over the past century in North America, where observations are numerous and accurate, does not confirm such an increase. And so they bring up this data to say that the increase is not confirmed. Well, that would be casting doubt on the view that the temperature has increased here. This is what they said. The temperature increased. So actually, it's here. I didn't like it at first. I thought it was too strong, but the cast doubt on, like, if you put something in a question, you are casting doubt on it. And so this one, I think I am making a jump here instead of here because where do they say we need it more outside of North America? Like, I feel like this is more directly being inferred to when they say does not confirm such an increase. Versus this, I had to make that extra step, right? And say, oh, well, we need it outside of North America. So let's go with E. Yeah, yeah, gotta be careful. That was tricky. It can be inferred that the author of the passage would most likely agree with which one of the following statements about a response to global warming. Okay, so I'm looking for something the author would agree to in regards to our response to global warming. So again, the author seems to be generally in line with the no regrets policy. Oh, and like, look, the author at least says the wisest policy is to not forestall action. Stuff that makes sense for, oh, okay. Yeah, no, like the author is like definitely supporting the no regrets policy, right? The author says the signs of others have aptly called this type of action a no regrets policy, but like the author themselves is like, do this thing. We're taking these steps. This is the best policy. So I can say that even stronger than where I was with it last time and just, yeah. So the response to global warming needs to be something like that no regrets policy, where we take measured steps that are good for other causes until we get more information that can clarify what we need to do and if greenhouse warming is real. Okay, great. Global warming. Oh, now they're calling it global. Did we call it global mean? Oh yeah, global. No, they didn't. I think they were calling it greenhouse warming this whole time. Interesting. I was trying to be careful and not say global, but okay. Hey, hope it doesn't throw people off. Um, hey. The most effective, okay, again, though, what I'm looking for is something where the author's saying do the no regrets policy. The most effective measures that can be undertaken to reverse greenhouse warming are not necessarily the most costly. I don't think so. I think the most effective might be the most costly, according to this. More costly measures can be taken if warranted, meaning like if we know that the CO2 is actually linked to the warming temperatures and if the warming temperatures are actually threatening, right? So, yeah, no, they might be the most costly, but we don't want to take those costs until we can actually confirm that there's a threat to act on. Okay, B, costly measures necessary to combat greenhouse warming should be undertaken only when, okay, the rise in temperature begins to exceed human beings' capacity to adapt to such an increase. Maybe. Right. Because if he's like, oh, well, it's not going to go to 9 degrees, it's going to be like 2 degrees, or something close to that. And we can survive that. Like, we'll just adapt. So then we don't really need to do anything unless it's actually going to be a threat. So I could see him saying that. I like that one. Let's keep going. Given the current state of knowledge about greenhouse warming, less costly measures should be implemented before expensive measures are tried. I like this one better, I think. I'm gonna come back and compare those directly, but um, I was hesitating on this one before, so that's why I think I like this one, but we'll see. Given the current state of knowledge about greenhouse warming, which is like sketchy, less costly measures should be implemented. Actually, I don't think I like this one before more expensive measures because this is saying like we should do things aimed at greenhouse warming that are just cheaper versus the more expensive things. And not exactly. He said that we should do things that make sense for economic and environmental reasons that don't have to do with greenhouse warming necessarily. Um, and the less costly. I don't think he said they had to be less costly. He just says we're doing things for economic and environmental reasons. So you might do costly things for those reasons. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I think I like me better than that one because of that. Like this is going off the line a little bit because this makes it seem like the every measure we're taking is aimed at greenhouse warming, and he was literally like, not a greenhouse warming. We're gonna go do economic and environmental right now. And the assumption you would make is that those would be helpful for greenhouse warming until we get more helpful knowledge about whether or not we're acting on that. Because again, if for this author, it's still in question whether or not global warming, greenhouse warming is even a thing. This author's like, it might not be a thing where the CO2 is tied to temperature increase. So it might not even be real, according to this author. So I actually don't like this one. I feel like I'm just gonna knock it out. D, scientists' uncertainty about the effect of greenhouse warming on global temperature might be resolved more quickly if a no regrets no, that's not gonna get the uncertainty figured out. The research needs to get figured out. The no regrets policy is just what you do until the research gets figured out. E, any measure intended to reduce greenhouse warming should be implemented only if it also addresses other environmental problems. Not as a whole. Um, yeah, no, this is too broad because if it said until we figure out more information on greenhouse warming or something like that, then this would be all right. But this is saying in general, right? Any measure intended to reduce greenhouse warming should be implemented only if it addresses other environmental problems. But no, if it turns out to be the case that global warming, greenhouse warming is real and that it's like going to increase way beyond our ability to live with that temperature increase, then he would say, or they would say, um, that we should take measures to reduce greenhouse warming for itself because it's a looming threat to our survival. So no, that's not it. It's going too far. Again, if it was this until we figure out this blah 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 blah, then we'd be good. But it's just no. I think it's B. And let me review this one. Costly measures necessary to combat greenhouse warming should be undertaken only when the rise in temperature begins to exceed human beings' capacity to adapt to such an increase. Yeah, the costly stuff to do greenhouse warming. We're waiting on that until we know that the temperature is going to be an actual threat to our survival. Yeah, because again, if it wasn't a threat to our survival, why would we be doing costly measures? Yeah, yeah. Oh no, it's C. Let's see. Okay, so let's see. Given the current state of knowledge about greenhouse warming, less costly measures should be implemented before expensive measures are tried. So, what the author's saying down there in that last paragraph, this is what we're talking about here, really, is right now, we don't know if greenhouse warming is real or to the extent in which it's going to warm the earth. So, until we figure that out, we're going to do things for economic and environmental reasons. Probably going to help out the greenhouse warming stuff, just play it safe. But we're going to do stuff based on economic and environmental justifications. Um, do those things first that have these other justifications, but that are also good for the warming. Then, when we get to a place of having more information, if it's actually a looming threat, um, go ahead and start doing the costly stuff and tie the information to the latest information available. Okay. So C says, given our current state of knowledge, yeah, it's shaky. Less costly measures should be implemented before expensive measures are tried. So the reason this is right is because we're talking about less costly measures before the more expensive measures are tried. So less costly would be those things that are economic and environmental reasons. And he literally says that the more costly measures would be taken when we have more knowledge. Okay. And then B is wrong because cost measures necessary to combat greenhouse warming should be undertaken only when the rise in temperature begins to exceed. Yeah, I guess this one's actually the one that's a little too strong because if the temperature begins to exceed human beings' capacity to adapt. So if we're only doing the costly measures when the temperature begins to exceed our capacity to adapt, the author didn't really say we had to wait until that point. The author just says that the more costly measures could be taken once we have more information, and we would tie policy decisions to the latest information available. The latest information didn't have to say that it was going to um, exceed our capacity to adapt. The author didn't do that much. The author's just like, take more costly once we have more information. So this is like the more conservative version that's in line with the conservative version here. This is like, oh, don't do anything costly unless like we can't survive it. And I don't think that the author's necessarily like even against doing costly if we won't survive. Maybe like we can just be uncomfortable and the author will still be okay with that. So I jumped the gun there. I think I was just really excited about B and C and I talked myself out of that. But like I said, something in my spirit was like, but wait, right as I clicked the button. It's okay. Again, these things happen. Moving forward. We can still get up there with one wrong. That's solid. 12. Which one of the following is most analogous to the course of action recommended in the last paragraph? Okay. So, course of action in the last paragraph is do stuff for other reasons first, whether or not this thing is real, but they could help it. And then when we get more information, do the more costly stuff tied to the data. Okay. We done said that 1,000 times, so we should be able to pick this up easily. A, in response to uncertain predictions, okay, check, regarding the likelihood that an asteroid will collide with Earth, the government has decided to fund an inexpensive but scientifically valuable program to track asteroids and to determine whether more costly members. No, no. It needs to be like tied to something else that's justified in the meantime. Well, it's inexpensive, but I would love it if it was tied to something else. How about I just keep it open, but I'm not liking it because I didn't see it tied to something else for the justification. Okay. Although scientists have not pinpointed how a newly discovered disease is spread, okay, check. The government has implemented a preventative health program to combat the disease by preventing any likely means by which the disease might be communicated. No, because they directly are addressing the disease despite not knowing how it's spread. And the problem is like this be more analogous if like we didn't know that the disease was even real. So no. In light of uncertain estimates about the remaining amount of fossil fuel energy on the Earth, okay, the government has set up a costly program to convert all industry machinery to run on less expensive alternative fuels. No, just like what? We set up a costly thing as our first step? Mm-mm. D, faced with many discrepant predictions about the depletion of the Earth's ozone layer, so many differing predictions about the depletion, about the lowering of the ozone layer. Okay, so we got shaky ground there too. People aren't in agreement with the predictions about the ozone layer going down. Okay, the government has decided to adapt the preventative measures suggested by the scientific group that predicted the most rapid depletion. No, we're not going with the most extreme measures and saying what they do. We will be being hesitant and doing things on other grounds. Okay. In response to scientific predictions that a disastrous earthquake is highly probable. I'm already not liking this. So I'm probably going back to A. Okay, great. In a certain region, the government has added new requirements to building codes that require relatively inexpensive modifications. Just all around no. Okay, so they have inexpensive modifications for a big issue, but like it's highly probable that it's going to happen versus shaky ground. So A is actually the best answer. I'm glad I kept it open so there's less hesitation when I go back. And again, this is okay because we have a certain situation and the government decided to do something inexpensive to start, and determine if we're going to do the more costly stuff. So it's analogous. I would love it if they did it based on some other grounds, but because it's inexpensive as a starting point, that sounds solid. Yeah. The path suggests that a rise in global temperature over the next half century, if it occurs, could it result from, okay, what did they say? I'm getting tired, y'all. I was like, okay, let me just go ahead and jump. Um, a rise in global temperature over the next half century could result from, what did they say without me even going back? I don't remember. Let me go back. Rising temperature could come from, I mean, the increase in CO2. I know that. Mm, it'll be CO2. I think that might be the answer. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, and it says suggest that. So it might also come down to these other things too, because it didn't have to be explicit. If suggest that, it might be something like pretty explicit, or it might be like down here with the fossil fuel energy and okay. So my guess would be increasing CO2, or if you want something more specific, replacing so fossil fuel energy. But like the rise in general could occur from fossil fuel energy? I don't know. Anyway, those are the things I'd be looking for. Increase in greenhouse gases, um, or something like fossil fuel. Oh, you know what? There is the natural circumstances too. A rise, not the most dramatic, not the harmful one, nothing like that. A rise could happen from increase in the gases, or it could be natural. I feel like those are the two best answers. The fossil fuel thing is just giving me like, ugh. So we're gonna stick with those two, and I'll keep that other one in my back pocket if I really need it. But like a natural climatic variation already sounds like the answer. An increase in solar re-radiation? No. Because what re-radiation was like going back out, right? Be re-radiate to outer space. Yeah, like that would be good for us. And it would lower or keep it the same or whatever. So that's the whole part of warming is it's not re-radiating. A 20%, a rise in global temperature would come from a 20% decrease in atmospheres? No, increase. A decrease in trace gases in it? Nope. Those are like CO2. The replacement of fossil fuel energy with solar energy. No. That's what I try and get you. If you replace solar energy with fossil fuel energy, maybe, but not the vice versa. That was one of the resolving things. So it should be this one. Yeah. Last one. Which one of the following best describes the organization of the passage? Mm. I'll remember. We presented the problem. Well, okay, wait. We presented, um, I gotta run it back. We presented how global warming works. And, oh, no, this is the problem. Well, the problem is the temperature thing. Did we say the? Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, the problem. Because they talk about the warming. So we present the problem. which is that greenhouse warming happens from these things, and we're probably going to get more of that temperature stuff. Then the second paragraph says, um, to present the problem and what we should be able to say about the problem, but we got further problems about the problem, right? Like, uh, we should be able to make some guesses to help resolve this issue, but there's stuff stopping us from even doing that. The fourth paragraph talks about um more of those issues with being able to like rely on what we have right now and make action on that. And the last paragraph says, because of this shaky ground, let's do measured, careful steps to approach this. So from first paragraph to the last, present the problem, talk about the shaky ground in the problem, and let's do these steps to like prevent the shaky ground. Well, to like until we figure out the shaky ground. Sorry. So that's the organization. Problems described. Okay. Discrepancies among proposed solutions to it are evaluated. Uh, Solutions? Not really. Not really. I'll leave it open, but like these weren't really solutions to the problem. These are like further observations to get us to solutions, but these weren't solutions themselves. And like this, again, we're like, this is like totally focused on more of the like problem itself. So I don't like that one. I'm gonna exit. I don't like it. A scientific dispute is discussed. Dispute? Case for one side is made. No. Okay, keep this open. Just a phenomenon is described. Okay. Different views of its effects are presented. The policy taking no. A solution to a scientific puzzle is advanced? No. A generally accepted scientific formula explained in order to introduce a detailed examination of a case? No. Okay, well then it's this. Oh, shoot. Oh no. That's what I get for rushing at the end. What happened? A phenomenon is described. Different views of its effects are presented. And a policy taking into account these differences is proposed. Different views of its effects are presented. Oh, okay. So global warming is presented, different views of its effects. So, like, the fact that it raised temperature from 0.5 to 1 degree, maybe. And so, like, the different views of its effects is like, is it happening? To what extent is it happening? Like, that's all the stuff being put into question, right? Yeah, all this putting into question is presenting different views of its effects. Okay. And a policy taking into account these differences in the effects, which is what we're working with the shaky ground is proposed. Okay. Why is this one wrong? Scientific problems described. Discrepancies among, again, that solutions thing. It was like, ew. Uh, there weren't solutions presented here. So that's why I didn't like this one. So I don't even like, I'm kind of mad at myself because I feel like if I was a little more careful and not rushing here at the end, then I might have been more inclined to pick this, but it happens. It's just, yeah, I can tell you right now, it's the solutions thing. No one was proposing solutions here. Um, and discrepancies among solutions. There were no solutions here. The solution came at the very end. So yeah, that would have been wrong. And I can definitely see this now. I'm saying more careful, different views of its effects because we don't know what the effects are. And so these are different like theories about what to do there and how to take it. Okay. All right. So that's the end of our review. And as I promised, I wanted to talk about a giveaway I'm doing. So we've hit 500 subscribers. We're over 500 now. And we're halfway to our viewing hour point for me to start doing monetization things with the channel. Whoop, whoop. To celebrate that 500 subscriber mark, I wanted to give back to an extent that I can actually handle as it just being me doing these things. So, my way of giving back is going to be by doing a giveaway. And I'm going to be giving away 1 free month of my tutoring services. So, what that'll be is you're going to get 1 free month of the 101 service, which means you'll get 1 free hour of 101 tutoring and you'll get 1 free hour of group tutoring for the month of October. So, to enter into this contest, this sweepstakes, what I want you to do is I want you to like this video. I want you to leave a comment. I want you to follow me on Ko-fi. You don't have to buy anything. Do not have to buy anything. But I want you to go to my Ko-fi page. I want you to follow me. And the comment that I want you to leave is how would this 3 month of tutoring be helpful for you? Keep it real simple. So, like the video, leave a comment explaining how the tutoring package would be helpful for you, and follow me on Ko-fi. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel and share with your folks. Those things are not required to enter this contest and to get the free tutoring month, but it makes it more helpful to other people so that these videos can be exposed and helping folks like it's helping you right now. And on top of that, when I get to 1,000, I'm definitely doing another one. So the faster y'all help me get to 1,000 subscribers, the faster I can offer more packages, and I'll probably do more than one next time. Um, so help me help you. Okay. All right. Well, that's the end of the video. Looking forward to seeing those likes, those comments, the follows on Ko-fi. And yeah, I'll see y'all for a logical reasoning one coming up at some point soon. All right. Bye.